So today we are going to cover a couple of important concepts, and also Anwar is among us. He is going to show us how to use OneNote to manage, to put our resources in a very handy way that can help us prepare for the certification, for interviews, and also as a reference at work. So please stay until the end. So as part of the integrating MuleSoft with databases, today we are going to see how to query MySQL and Postgres from MuleSoft. So we will see how to integrate both databases with MuleSoft. And we have two applications of multiple data sources or databases in this case. One is you may have usually data resides in different sources, so I have to bring it together and merge it. So we'll see a simple merging example. So one table in MySQL, another table in Postgres, query both of them, brings the data together and display it in Postman is one example that we'll see. The other one is first successful. So usually, for example, the cloud services, if you consider Amazon, AWS, for example, when you upload your data to S3 or to any of their data services, they have replicators of the data in different locations, so that when one of the locations is for some reason not working, then you get still the applications will be up and running because they will get the data from elsewhere. So in MuleSoft, there is a router called first successful. What this does is it checks different sources of data. In our case, if the first one is not alive, if it is not online, if it cannot get the data from the first one, it is going to check from the second one. If the second one is not working, the third one, once it gets one of the routes working, then it returns the result from that. So this is used for high availability, so that your applications will not be down. Example, when your application is under maintenance or even down because of some natural issues, natural calamities, or weather-related issues such as hurricane, for example, a strong hurricane. If the data storage locations are in different places, then when one of them is not working, the rest of them will work. So we'll see these two examples. I am planning to take around 40 minutes, and then the rest 20 minutes, Anwar will take it and explain how to use OneNote to organize our notes. Anwar, did you say about 20 minutes, right? Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I think 15 to 20 minutes would be fine.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. So let's see examples. So as usual, the first one is about merging data. And to merge data, let me get back. To merge data, we will use scatter gather, and we have been using this router in different hands-on examples. We said scatter gather sends a request message to parallel targets concurrently or in parallel or together. Then each route sends the response. Then the scatter gather collects all of them together, and what it returns is it returns an object, a mule object that contains all the mule events from each route. Let me make sure first I mute all of you. I will unmute you.
There is some noise, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Let me mute all of you for now, then I will unmute you later to take questions. So yeah, we saw scatter gather multiple times with sample questions also. We said scatter gather combines the mule events from the different routes, and it sends at the end there is an object, a mule event object, and to access the payload from each route, we said we do payload dot 0.payload concatenated with payload.1.payload and so on. We'll see that in the example, but we have been using this again and again. So you can go to the previous slide. It's also the other project that we're working on. So to merge data, we will use scatter gather here. So why are we using scatter gather? We want to send the request in parallel to both databases and get the data from both of them, concatenate it, and then display it in Postman. So our project in here is, what we are doing is we have a listener, HTTP listener with get method, and we will send an employee ID. So the employee ID, we will put it as a URI parameter. Then this employee ID, we can save it as a variable, or just even since it is a simple example, we can pass it also as attributes.URI parameters.params.employee ID, or from the variable also. Then we have a scatter gather. So the scatter gather, it is going to send the request to both Postgres and MySQL. So in the previous exercise, I think it was in week 6, we have installed Postgres and MySQL and also created the dummy data for this tutorial. If you have not done that, please go to my blog and do the install these softwares and have the database also, because we will use it again and again to practice different concepts. So from Postgres, in our case, we will get data from the employee table. Let me show you the tables we have first. So I have both of them open. I have my SQL workbench open here. So this is the employee table. We created this Northwind database that contains data, dummy data with different tables. And we have employee table, employee territory, and so on. So the same database, in this case, the same database, I have it in both MySQL and Postgres. Let me log in here. Postgres, this is the PG admin. So this is the user interface. Both PG admin and workbench are user interfaces for Postgres PG admin and for MySQL workbench. So if I go here under schemas, I have Northwind here, which is the same database, and the tables are here. So let's assume, for example, let's assume what we are doing is in Postgres, let's assume we have this employee table only, which has, if I just right click here and do view all rows. So the data looks like this. There is employee ID, last name, first name, title, and so on. Now, assume this employee territory doesn't exist in this database. And we want to combine both of them. Like an employee, we want to get all this information from the employee table and also employee territory. So the employee territory could be in here, in the employee table, we have city, region, postal code, country, and so on. The employee territory could be something custom regionalization based on, for example, school district or television or radio station coverage and so on. Anyway, so this one, if I just show you what it has some employee ID and territory ID. And this territory ID corresponds to some territory. So let's assume we have in Postgres, let's assume we have only employee ID. And in MySQL, let's assume we have employee territory only. Then what we are doing is for a given ID, for a given employee ID, we want to get the data from the employee table and also from the employee territory. So we have to combine them basically. We have to combine the data from MySQL and Postgres. So that's what we are doing. So let me get back to slide view here. So here from Postgres, we are using it to get data from the employee table. MySQL, we will get data from the employee territory, both of them for a given ID, because when we send a request, we will pass the employee ID as a URI param, then we will merge the data from both of them, merge and return it. So, and we said if we have scatter gather with multiple routers, just a reminder also, we said the time taken by the scatter gather is the maximum of the time taken by each route. Just a reminder. So it looks like this. We have get method with HTTP listener, saving the variable as the ID as a variable, the scatter gather, connecting to Postgres and MySQL, combining the data and returning it adjacent. So we will see how to combine to each database. So this is one concept that we'll see. The other one is about first successful router. So the first successful router, as I said, it iterates through a list of configured processing routers until one of the routes executes successfully. Once one of them executes successfully, then it doesn't check the rest of them. And if none of them execute successfully, then it returns an error. So the same thing in this case, we will send a request with employee ID as ARI parameter. Then there is the first successful router. So on the top, it starts from the top. We have Postgres. It is going to try to check to get data from the employee table from Postgres. If it gets a result, then it is not going to check MySQL. But if Postgres is not available, if it cannot get data from Postgres, if it cannot connect to Postgres, then it is going to try to get them data from MySQL. If both of them are not there, then it is going to give us an error. So it looks like this. We have first successful, combined Postgres and MySQL. For both of them, we are using select operation, obviously, because we said select is the verb that we use to query data from databases. Okay. So, and quickly, I have the project on GitHub. You can go to GitHub and download it. And for some reason, if yours doesn't work, you can compare, or you can fork it also. So I have step by step, I have put how to create the project on the Google Slides. So rather than spending time recreating it again, I will just show you my project and explain the concept, and we'll test it together. And when you get time, go over the slides and reproduce it yourself. And for some reason, if you get stuck, then you can compare with the project on GitHub, or you can ask others in the Telegram group we have if you face any issues. So now I will get to Anypoint Studio. So I have these two flows. The first one is about merging data. The second one is about the first successful router. In both of them, we have select operations. In both of them, we are connecting to Postgres and MySQL. So the first thing we want to discuss here is how do we connect to the databases. And we said in our last class, we saw how to connect to MySQL. I will quickly review it here also because many of you since you were not there last time. So we said to connect to databases, like for example, let me show. If I click this under configuration, since this is a connector, like HTTP connector, we have to provide configuration. So I have set up a connection for both of them, but now let me click add and show you what it looks like. If I just click add here, as you can see, I give it a name here. For my SQL, I just added my SQL as the end. For Postgres, I added Postgres as the end. Then if it is under connection here, for my SQL, you have my SQL connection. So you just select this one. Then it asks you now, in my case, since a driver or a library has already been installed, as you can see, there is a green tick mark here. But if you see a red, orange exclamation, that means the driver is not there. So you just click configure here and click finish, then it will install it for you. You don't need to do anything for MySQL connection. Then we say to connect to MySQL, you provide the host, which is localhost in our case, the port 3306, your username, password, and the database that you are connecting to. You provide it here. You can explicitly put them here, or you can use application properties. A file, you put all your credentials in one file, and then you call that file in here. We'll see that. So that is how you can connect. You have two ways to connect so far that we have seen. Either statically put the credentials here, or putting the credentials in a configuration file and pointing to that configuration file. So the advantage of putting your credentials in the configuration file is it is more secure, and also you can dynamically change it. Like if you have multiple applications connecting to one database, if you put the credentials, static credentials here without configuration file, and if your credential changes, then you have to go to each one of them and update it. But if you have, if you are using configuration file, then once you update the configuration file, everything will be updated dynamically. So that is better for a couple of reasons. So that is what we are going to do here. And for Postgres, it is slightly different. As you can see, there is no Postgres here. There is a Microsoft SQL Server connection, Oracle, and Derby, and generic. So to connect to Postgres, we select generic here, and under configure, we come to add Maven dependency. All of these steps I have put them in the Google Slides. You select here, add Maven dependency. Then in here, you have to put the Maven dependency for Postgres. And to get that, you just go online. And if I search, let me move this here. If you just search Postgres Maven, then you go here for these are different versions of Postgres. If you click the most recent one, it shows you here the code that you have to take to copy paste in your application. So once you copy paste this, then all the required libraries will be installed for you. So I come here, then replace this. If I replace this, in my case, it has already been installed. That's what it is saying. It says already exists, but you click finish, then the required library will be installed. So all these steps are in the Google Slides. So to add the application properties file, I have it here. So as you can see, in my case, I have MySQL. So this is a YAML file, and you put your credentials in a hierarchical way. We said, like for example, mysql.host is, if you do mysql.host, it will give you localhost. If you do mysql.password, it will give you this password. If you do mysql.user, it will give you root, and so on. So to create this application property under your project, as you see, my project name is merge and first successful. You go to source main resources. You right click here. In my case, I have already created. I just want to show you the steps. So click here, go new, then you go to file, then you give the file name here. I call it config.yaml. You can call it anything as far as the extension is YAML, and you put your credentials also in a hierarchical way. Once you create that file, then you have to tell it that this file contains the global configuration properties. So to do that, you go here, and under global elements, you go to create, then global configurations, then configuration properties. So you want to tell it where your configuration properties are. So you click OK. Then it asks you which file contains your configuration properties. By clicking the three dots, you get the different files here. Config.yaml is here. So when I click config.yaml and click OK here and click OK here, then it will know that that contains a configuration property. In my case, this configuration property has already been created. As you see, the file name is config.yaml. So now to create the configuration database configuration properties, what you do is you go to create. Then now it is connector configuration. You go to connector, database configuration, click OK. Then from the drop down here, as we said, you give it a name here. We have both MySQL and Postgres. As you can see, the name for each one of them is here. The first one here is MySQL. The second one is Postgres. For MySQL, it is relatively easy. From the connection type, you select MySQL connection. You make sure the required library is added by clicking configure here. Mine, since it is added, it is modified. but if it is not added yet, you click configure and then you click finish. It will add the library for you. Then once you come here, let me show you what you do. Once you come here, since I have the configuration for MySQL here, if I click edit, so this is how we provide our credentials. So let me maximize this. So as you can see, for host, I put $ curly braces mysql.host. So in here, probably let me copy this to Notepad and I'll show you. So if I copy this to Notepad, so we told it this file contains our configuration properties. This is our configuration properties file. So when I do my local mysql.host, it is the same as putting localhost. If I do mysql.password, it is the same as putting MuleSoft, and so on. So in here, if we come, that's what I have done here. As you see, all of them, they start with $ and within curly braces, mysql.host, this is the same as putting localhost. mysql.port, this is the same as putting the port number, which is 3306. mysql.user, the same as putting my user. Root, so use could be slightly different. These are default. So root is default user when you install MySQL, and the port is 3306. But if you put a different number, that could be different. And password, the default is admin, I think. But if you change it, if you put something different, then you have to remember it. Or if you forget it, also you can change it. Okay. So this is my password and so on. Now if I click test connection, then it will connect successfully. Once you do this, you have to test the connection. I'm trying to be fast. And for Postgres, it is slightly different. To connect to Postgres, so let me maximize this. Under connection, we choose generic connection. Then the driver, if we click configure, and we copy paste this code there. So if I just copy this, come here, it will tell me it already exists because I have done it. But if it is your first time, you click add Maven dependency and you put it here. So when I paste here, it will change. It will detect that it needs Postgres driver, or a driver that helps MuleSoft to connect with Postgres. So if I click here, you see this changed it to Postgres, for example, this and this, but here it says it already exists. Once you do that, to connect to Postgres, it is slightly different. In MySQL, we provided host, user, password, port, and so on. Whereas for Postgres, rather than host and port, the host port are connected together. You just give URL, and if you see the URL, it is like this. So this is host, we have local host, and this is the port, and we have the database also. The database also, it is case sensitive. In our case, the code I shared in the tutorial, it creates the database in uppercase. Let me show you here. As you can see, this is a database. So if you put lowercase n, it will not work for you. But rather than in MySQL, we explicitly put the host separately, the host, the port, and the database. Whereas in Postgres, we create a URL. So in your case, what do you do? The only thing that you have to change in your case is actually the URL. You don't need to change it if you have the default port, and if you didn't change the database name also. You can just use this as is, but your password will be different. And your user, by the way, the host and the port of Postgres, you can simply go from here and see it. If I just click Postgres here and go to properties and go to connections, you can see the port is this number, and username is Postgres, and the host is localhost. That is how we created the URL, by combining everything. So you can take this and check your host, port, and database and create a URL. Your password is what you put. Username also, as we saw here, the username is Postgres if you didn't change it. And driver name is, yeah, just for the driver name, just to put this one, the driver name is Postgres SQL driver. So once you do that, and you put it like this, using the same approach, using $, curly braces, Postgres dot, as you can see here, I am doing Postgres.url is the same as putting this. Postgres.password is the same as putting this. I can call this like, rather than password, for example, I can call it PWD, an acronym for password, but I have to make sure here, rather than Postgres.password, it should be Postgres.pwd, because it is a key. These are the keys. So to get the values for each key, you have to spell it correctly, like it is spelled in your configuration file. Okay, so once we do that, now we are connected. We can connect to both databases. Now let me show you what SQL code we are writing in each one of them. Then we'll test them. So let's start with combining the data, the first flow. So this one, okay, let me start from the HTTP listener. I have employee ID as a URI parameter because I am putting it as a curly braces, as you can see here. In here, I'm creating a variable called ID, and to access its value is attributes.uri parameters.employee ID. Or you can also pass this one in the query itself. But if you have complex kind of flow, it is better to save your URI parameter as an ID so that you don't lose it. Now, under the scatter gather, it will send requests to both of them in parallel, we said. For this employee ID, give me data from the employee table and also from the employee territory table. Combine them together and return it is what we are doing. So in here, what did we write? From the employee. So from Postgres, we are getting data from the employee table. So select star from employee, where employee ID equals to colon employee ID. So in our last class, we said when you do colon any string, that is a key, and its value, it is going to try to get it. You have to specify its value in the input parameters. So let me see if I can maximize this. Anyway, you can see it, I guess, here. So this one, for example, I can give it fish. I can call it fish. It doesn't matter. But if I call this fish, then the value fish is a key. Then I have to come and put fish here or anything. I mean, anything. It is a key. As far as since it is a key, its value though, its value is vars.id because we have a variable here. So that is how we specify the SQL query text and also the input parameter. This is important to remember. You will get it in the certification also. The key is specified using colon, some string, and then that key, its value, you give it in the input parameters. So this is from Postgres. We are getting data from the employee table. In MySQL, on the other hand, we are getting data. We are getting territory ID from the employee territory table. The same thing. The key, as you can see here. There is also a slight difference between the employee ID in the employee table and employee territory table. Let me show you their differences. So this one, employee. Okay, in here what do we have? The column names are, there is employee ID here, first name, last name, and so on. Employee territory, there is employee ID and territory ID. However, if I go to Postgres and go to the employee table, just click here and view data, for example, you can see it is not spelled out. It is EMPIID. So yeah, in the where clause, I have to specify the exact column name. So that's why you see difference between the column names in MySQL, which is employee ID, whereas in Postgres, it is imp ID. But the keys, you can call them whatever you want as far as you specify their values in the input parameters box. So that's what we did. Now, next we are combining them here in the transform message. This one, you have seen it multiple times. I hope now you remember it. So from scatter gather, it sends an object that contains the mule events from each route, and it is called payload by default. So payload.0 will give us the mule event from the first route. Then when we add .payload, it will give us the payload from the first route. Double plus is a concatenation, putting them together, we said. Then from the second one, we simply change this 0 to 1. Then we put them together. So this one will give us concatenated results from both of them. Now let me also describe this, what we have done. Let me show you what we have done with the first successful. So the first successful, the connection is the same, but now we are not combining data. We are using only one table, the employee table. So the employee table, what it is going to do is it will check the first route, which is connecting to Postgres and getting data. If that works fine, then it is not going to check this one, the connection to MySQL. It will not check this one. If this one doesn't work, if it cannot connect to Postgres, then it will go check this one. So how we are going to check in our case today is we will stop them one by one, and we will add a logger to know where the data is coming from. That way we understand that. So my application is running already. Now let me send requests and show you. So the first one, it is combine data employee ID. So copy this, go to Postman, and paste it here. So the URI parameter here, I will replace by an employee ID. That means, for example, if I do 1, it is going to give me data about employee ID 1 from the employee table and also their territory. If I click send, I get this one. So you see it is an array. This one is from the employee table, but this employee ID is associated with 2 territories. Maybe they live in 2 different places, or before they were living in one place and now they moved to another place. We can see that if we go the employee territory, you see employee ID 1, their employee territory is these 2 territory IDs. These 2 territory IDs, and if I go to Postman, that is what you see here. 06897 and 19713. Here 06897 19713. So that's what we see here. You can also check for 4, the same thing. Employee ID is 4, as you can see here. This one is associated even with 3 territory IDs. If I go here for 4, employee ID 4, you see they are associated with 3 territories. We have employee ID up to 9. What happens if we pass 15, or an employee ID that doesn't exist? If I do like this, do this, it should return an empty array, we said. When we use, we said last time, a couple of points we said, worth remembering. When you use a select operation, the data is an array and it is in Java format. And if your query doesn't return any data also, it is an array, but it is an empty array. So square bracket means empty array. So that's what we got here. Okay, now let's spend some time with the second route. Is this one, the first successful. Now let me add a logger to show you. Add logger here. So the logger, it is just going to print a message to the console here. That will help us to know where the data is coming from. So for Postgres, I can add data from Postgres. For this one, let's add data from MySQL. Save this. Have it updated. Okay. So let me test it. This one is get data rather than combining, because we are just getting data from the employee ID. What we are checking is if one data source doesn't exist, if it is down, get data from the other one. So get data is the path with that URI parameter. So go here, this one, I will replace it to get data. Now, when I send a request, it starts from the top, we said. It starts from the top, as you can see here, because Postgres connection is on the top. So now it should get data from Postgres. So what it should print is this one. It should tell us data from Postgres. Then we will stop Postgres and see if it gets the data from MySQL. So send. Okay, the data we got it for employee ID 1. Let's see what got printed on the console. If we see, come to the console here, scroll to the left, as you can see, data from Postgres, because it didn't check the MySQL connection. It didn't work. It didn't care to check it because the first route ran successfully. Now let's stop Postgres connection. So if you are in Windows, in the search bar, if you type services, you will get this one. In my case, this one is, let me, I have to run it as administrator. So now see the different applications are here, and let's search for Postgres, and then we'll stop it. Scroll down, Postgres is here, status, it is running, and there is stop here. So I will stop it. Stop. It is stopping. Now it's stopped. Stop, that's why we see start. Now when I send the request again, it is going to print data from MySQL, not from Postgres. So clean this first, the console, to see the new message. Send again. Okay, the same data. It is just for employee ID 1 from another source. Where is employee ID? Here. Employee ID 1 from another source. It should be MySQL. If we come to the console now, what do you see? There is some error message. Okay. Yeah, I think the error message didn't impact us. You see data from MySQL. Oh yeah, the error message is it couldn't connect to the first route, so it went to the second one. So if you see, it says data from MySQL, but before it was it logged data from Postgres. Okay, perfect. So now we have checked if in the first successful router, if one of the data sources, one of the databases is not available, then it is going to check the other one. Now let's stop MySQL also. Let's stop both of them. So MySQL is here. As you can see, the status is running, whereas Postgres, the status, it doesn't show any status. So that means it is not running. So this one also, click it and stop it. So none of them is working now. So assume now we have one application and your application is down, or you have two locations, two data sources, and both of them are down. Then your application will be offline. So if I send a request now, it should not give me any data. But like this, it's checking, cannot get connection, as you can see. So it couldn't get any connection is what this is saying. So it didn't return any data. Now let me get back and turn on Postgres, for example. Click Postgres and start it. Perfect. Now let's send another request. Click send. Perfect. As you can see now, we see data, and if you go to the console, it should tell me that it got data from Postgres. As you can see, there is data from Postgres message here. So this is how, these are the two concepts that I have for today: combining data from multiple databases using scatter gather, and also for high availability using with very successful using different databases, so that if one of them to make sure that your application is always available. If some of them are not available, then some of them will be, at least one of them will be available, will be online. Then that way your application will work. Okay, we have only 15 minutes. If you have any questions, I will take questions after Anwar. I think let me stop now.